Jon Ronson is our guest, documentary filmmaker, worldwide best-selling author. Both of his best-selling books got optioned to make films. One of them, Men Who Stare at Goats, is now in theaters. One of the #1 movies out there in the world. It's in the top 3. The second book, the first in the series, Them, that I'm a big part of, got optioned to be turned into a movie, and that's probably still going to happen. We will talk to Jon Ronson about that before he leaves us. But for stations that just joined us on the radio, he's also simulcasting at prisonplanet.tv. For the viewers joining us from London, during the break we were talking about Bohemian Grove. He's getting interviewed for Jesse Ventura's TV show, one of the last interviews they're doing on Skull and Bones, on Bohemian Grove, on Bilderberg, because he has a differing view than I do, but not that big of a view change.
The thing we really agree on is, I thought what I saw was kind of stupid, and you thought what we saw inside Bohemian Grove was, proof of Satanism and so on, and I didn't. But what we agree on is that the participants in the ritual at Bohemian Grove seem to take it really seriously, and that's a really interesting question.
Yes, you were there in the crowd as they were engaging in the mock human sacrifice, the effigy of a boy. And, were the old men not grinding their teeth and making sexual pleasure noises? Were they not in a raptured state?
Well, they did seem to. I don't know if I'd use those exact words. I didn't think kind of sexual pleasure or so on, but they did seem to be, really into it, really intense about it. And you noticed that, and I noticed that. And it was strange, and I came away thinking, frankly, that I was the most sane person in the entire Redwood Forest, because I didn't agree with you and Mike's interpretation of the ceremony, but also I could see that, the participants were taking it just as seriously as you were, and I did find that very odd. And in fact, that was the kind of germ of the idea, this idea of kind of bubbles of craziness at the heart of power that eventually led on to me writing The Men Who Stare at Goats. Really the Men Who Stare at Goats began to form in my mind that night when we were at Bohemian Grove.
Well, from meeting you out at Waco more than 10 years ago to today, I've seen you in BBC and CNN interviews that you've changed your views, because 10 years ago you'd laugh, there was no global government, there was no secret room, there wasn't a plan. And then 3 or 4 years later, I'd see you say, no, there really is a Bilderberg group, they really do want a world government, but you can differ on what their plans are or argue about, are they really in control? Now they're openly announcing a global carbon tax, a world government, we're going to pay our taxes to a private bank of the world. They have the Framework Convention on Climate Change. They're saying Al Gore is a prophet and that his new movie is about how it's a global religion of the earth. And, John, a lot has changed. What's your view now on the New World Order? Does it still not exist?
Well, what you're saying now about kind of what stuff might have leaked out of, recent Bilderberg meetings, I don't know. I've not read the minutes of the last few years' meetings, so I can't comment on that. But the reason why I said that I felt that, their agenda was to an extent a creation of world government is because that's what one of the founding members of the Bilderberg group said to me on the record. It was Dennis Healy, Lord Healy, who was one of the the first people to set up Bilderberg, and he said to say that we were striving for a world government is exaggerated but not wholly unfair. Those are his actual words. He said because basically, Bilderberg was set up post Second World War, and they saw that, that the last thing the world needed was a politician who was too much of an ideologue. They didn't want any more Hitlers, so they kind of figured a world government where politics wasn't really in the hands of politicians. It was much more about the flow of capital. That seemed to have been the reason why Bilderberg, as a kind of centrist globalist thing, was set up. So that there we are not in disagreement either.
But John, the mainstream media still out of one side of their mouth says there's no such thing as a world government. And then out of the other side of their mouth, they say, yes, it's a great thing, and it's going to be non-democratic and authoritarian because we, the wise men, know best, i.e. Financial Times of London headline, and now for world government. Here is the New York Times 2 weeks ago, Ban Ki-moon, and it says, Ban Ki-moon again, is the author of this, and he went on to say in the article that global government is what we need. He goes on in the article to say one world government is what we need, and that carbon taxes will be the funding mechanism for this. I mean, this is authoritarian. This is unelected. This system is not democratic, and you find out the very same wise men that created Hitler and created Mussolini are the very wise men that created Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein, or their sons did.
Well, my theory about Bilderberg is that their vision back in the early 1950s, post the Second World War, was in their minds quite idealistic. They thought that a safer way of running the world, having just lived through Mussolini and Hitler, a safer way would be to de-ideologue the politicians and to put power in the hands of business. Because businessmen only care about the flow of money. They don't care about politics and ideologies. But of course, what the last 50 years has taught us is that CEOs can be just as corrupt as politicians, and frequently are. So, that's my view on Bilderberg, is that it was an idealistic vision, which, like all idealistic visions, went wrong.
Well, have you read where it's been declassified now that Hitler was on MI5 payroll and so was Mussolini?
I don't know anything about that. I can't comment on that because I know nothing about it. I'd be interested in reading the link.
Yeah, that's London Guardian, which you write for, Times of London. I mean, we already knew this from Milner Group declassified documents. And, yeah, no. Well, I mean, you know about Edward VIII being a Nazi, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no question that a whole load of the, ruling gentry of Britain and during the rise of the Nazi Party, loved the Nazis. And they were constantly inviting the Nazis over, the British ruling classes, and, putting them up for tea. And, there's a wonderful novel about that called The Remains of the Day. So, there's no question that was going on. The Mitfords, I can't remember which Mitford was it?
Well, what happened is the British said, you go ahead and attack, we're going to back you. And then they flip-flopped at the end. And that's why the deputy Fuhrer flew over Rudolf Hess and got captured. The issue is, John, it's all been declassified now, and it was all staged. Hitler was set up. So this corporate group of bankers that set up Bilderberg, Prince Bernhard the Nazi and all the rest of them, this is all a big giant joke. I mean, you know about Prince Philip and all his calls for eugenics. I mean, you've certainly heard those statements. I mean, have you read the White House Science Czar's own publication, Eco Science, calling for putting poison in the water to sterilize us? Have you seen this, John?
I know nothing about that. But, and also, I firmly believe that, we know that some of the founders of the Bilderberg Group, did have Nazi ties. I think it was
Prince Bernhard.
Was it Joseph Rettinger as well, or just
yes?
But my personal view, and this is the kind of non-conspiratorial view, is that that's not an important fact. And the important fact was that these were people who were kind of idealistic globalists. I mean, that's
hold on, Bilderberg has released 1954 documents from their founding after all these years saying they didn't exist, where they said we're going to create a European Union, we're going to create a global government. I mean, this whole time they've been lying about it, and then now at the final moment they spring it on the public.
Well, that's interesting. That would be interesting to read, definitely. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, the idea that, that a single currency and a European Union was kind of high on Bilderberg's agenda back in the 50s. That doesn't surprise me at all.
All right, well, instead of Alex Jones barking questions at Jon Ronson at jonronson.com, let's start getting into The Men Who Stare at Goats. That was the sequel to them, I guess. International bestseller, back in paperback all over the world right now. The movie is out, doing very well. What was the research you did on the book, A, and how accurate to the book is the film?
Right, okay. Well, I mean, as I said, I think the book really began, even though I didn't realize it, that night when you and I were together in Bohemian Grove, because it did really, you and I couldn't have interpreted, the ritual differently that we saw at Bohemian Grove. We had a completely different view. But the one thing we agreed on was that the participants, these men of wealth and power, seemed to be like really into it. And I thought to myself, my God, this is not how I would spend my summer vacation, having a mock human sacrifice in the forests of Northern California. It seemed like a very weird thing. And so I thought, well, what other weirdness, what other irrationality can be found in the corridors of power? So the first thing I did was with my producer, John Sargent, was kind of look into remote viewing. There was something kind of tangible that was out there a little bit. And post 9/11, I met Uri Geller, Uri Geller with the spoon bending and so on. And he'd always claimed to have been a secret psychic spy working for the CIA. And kind of nobody believed him because they sort of figured that the CIA wouldn't do that. So post 9/11, they thought that the CIA was sensible. We may be nuts, but the CIA is surely sensible. So post 9/11, I met Uri Geller, and he said to me, he was very mysterious, and finally he took off his dark glasses and he said to me, if you repeat what I'm about to tell you, I will deny it.